Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers around the world. My name is Win Morgan, and as president of the International Social Marketing Association, it's both my privilege and pleasure to introduce the 23rd in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing teaching, research, and practice. I'm here today with Jay Kassir, our organizer of the webinar series, and the chair of our ISMA Membership and Affiliations Committee of our Board of Directors. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you, Win. Good to talk with you again. This is our second webinar today. Hi, everyone.
We're going to begin in just a minute, but before we do, I'd like to share some timely updates provided through the International Social Marketing Association. Those of you, first of all, who have not yet signed up for the World Social Marketing Conference, which will be held in the United States 16th, 17th May. This is the last day that ISMA member discount is being offered. So if you're coming and you want your discount, go to WSMconference.com and make sure that you sign up with the ISMA discount, which is available on the ISMA website. Also, remember to visit our job board and our events calendar at i-socialmarketing.org. By the way, if you're an employer and you're looking to hire some social marketers for your place, you can send us an email and we will gladly send you a coupon for up to 3 job announcements for our ISMA job board. You can send an email to me at win@levinmorgan.com. and we'll send you that coupon right out for 3 free job announcements. Are you looking for a job? Upload your resume to the job board. And remember that we have our events calendar, and if you want to submit an event, just go to our ISMA event calendar and click on the top right, submit an event, and you can submit your own event for us. Now, I'd like to turn over the webinar to our moderator, Jay Kassir. Jay? Jay, it sounds better when you're not on mute.
Yeah. Thank you, Win. You're absolutely right on that. So welcome everyone once again, and thank you, Win. I want to remind you that if there are more than one of you at your location, we'd appreciate it if you would let us know how many you are using the chat box. And do ask your questions, please, as we're going along. Don't wait until the end of the webinar. Normally we'll wait until the end and then we'll answer them in the order that they came in. And with that, Win, if we can just go over to the introductory slide here, it's my pleasure to welcome our 2 speakers, Phillip Holden and Matthew Wood. Phillip is a senior lecturer at the University of Greenwich in London, UK. After a career in marketing, which included running a marketing communications agency and then working with the Charities Aid Foundation, Phillip joined Greenwich and specialized in non-traditional approaches to marketing and marketing communication. He devised and teaches the social marketing course at Greenwich and has undertaken research and consultancy in the not-profit and behavior change fields. He's a member of ISMA and has presented at the European Social Marketing Conference and will be in Washington in May for the World Conference. Our second speaker, Matthew Wood, is a principal lecturer in marketing at the University of Brighton, where he's head of the marketing subject group and social marketing unit leader. He is an associate of leading social marketing agencies, the Campaign Company and Brilliant Futures. Matthew is a founding member of the National Social Marketing Centre's Academic Advisory Group and established Brighton University as the UK academic partner for the World Social Marketing Conference. He has presented papers and keynote speeches at leading marketing conferences and published work in Social Marketing Quarterly and the Journal of Social Marketing. And in 2013, Matthew received the Australian Association of Social Marketing's inaugural award for the most impactful journal of social marketing publication in the last 2 years for his paper, Marketing Social Marketing. Phillip and Matthew, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Phil Holden, and first of all, thank you very much for inviting us, and thank you very much for those people who've joined us. What we're about to talk about really is part of a project that started quite a few years ago with conversations at the European Social Marketing Conferences. I think it was initially conversations in Lisbon, and this is an ongoing project. So we're inviting consultation on these standards and the process, as much as we're presenting what we've found so far and the outline of the design, if you like, of these qualifications. So though it started as a European project, it was quickly noted, especially at the last European conference in Finland, that there was potential for all of the associations, the various associations both in America and around the world, to be involved in this and certainly to contribute to it. So I think the first thing to really describe is what we mean by this, what's described here as a sponsorship of these perhaps European-wide but potentially worldwide standards, and something about the potential benefits for the associations, for members, for students, and for educational institutions. And these kinds of benefits are potential benefits. They're open for question, for debate. But one of the things we see as being central to this is the increased visibility and status that would accrue to those with expertise in social marketing, and also increased visibility and status of the discipline itself. There's a sense in which we can help to position social marketing and behaviour change in the academy and in the wider field as more people enter the job market with some recognised, endorsed social marketing qualification. I think we're also in a position to add value, a kind of a stamp of quality to the education and training that existing providers already have in this area. And in doing that, I think we can establish the community of practice, represented by the associations, as a hub, a custodian of some of the features of social marketing and behaviour change as a profession that we'll talk about in a minute. We also think there's probably a cause to look at the range of qualifications and training programs that are available around the globe, and we've done some work on that, but we need more help in filling that out. And it's possible that by having these kinds of qualifications and endorsement of qualifications, that we might encourage more to be established around the world when they see the benefit of being connected with the various associations. So what we've got here really is the beginnings of a project that we think will progress significantly in Washington in May. And it starts really with looking at what offerings are already available. And in fact, we were perhaps surprised that there weren't more. You might be familiar with Kathleen Kelly's research in 2008 and updated in 2013. And her conclusion was actually that there weren't that many courses around. We'll come on to that in a moment, but from our own experience, we're aware that the landscape was changing slightly. And reaching out to people at the European conference, there wasn't a huge response in terms of courses and programs that we didn't know about. So this is still part of the gathering information and views and opinions before we can really finalise the proposals. What we found so far then was that it's approximately 28 undergraduate courses, about the same number of postgraduate or graduate offerings around the world. and this is from the USA, which obviously is a major part of this. Switzerland, Israel, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the West Indies, Hong Kong, even Venezuela, Ireland, and Canada, of course. But we also noticed that quite a few institutions had stopped delivering courses, and one or two that we knew about had changed the name or changed the direction of the courses or programs, or indeed the departments that were managing those programs. So we found a mixed picture. The background, as most of you will know, is that the consensus definition that was agreed, I think, and published back in 2012, and or sort of rather the process was begun in 2012 and then published towards 2015, sets out a fairly open definition of what social marketing is, and that was to achieve a number of things. But perhaps more importantly, there was also agreement over the same period about what academic competencies were required in social marketing training and education. And some of you might be aware of Craig Lefebvre promoting those. And in that he mentioned, I think, an important point, that they were a guide to effective and ethical social marketing, and that they were not prescriptive. So they're fairly open requirements or criteria by which you could judge content of social marketing training and courses. So it seemed logical for us, at least, to start with those guidelines and see if we could follow through in terms of applying those, detecting those in existing offerings. And the way we did that really was to start looking at our own programs. And Matthew has even longer experience than I have in delivering these programs, and went through the process of looking at the courses available at Brighton. There's only one such course at Greenwich, so my initial process was fairly simple. It was made even more simple by the fact that I'd recently rewritten the courses to reflect the consensus academic competences anyway. But Matt, maybe you want to say something about the process of looking at your program.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I mean, I set up my I've got a postgraduate certificate in social marketing, which is mainly aimed at working professionals. It's a flexible program, and also there's a full-time master's degree in social marketing, and I run an undergraduate module for final year business students, and they've all been running sort of 7 or 8 years now. So this is before many of the we're starting to think about the competencies. Yeah, I think I found it an interesting process, and sort of on the positive side, I think quite a lot of the stuff that we're looking for, I think, is in my programs, which is a relief. But one of the things that we'll come back to later is I think one of the issues is the level of application you can expect within particular courses. So when we look at the competences, there's quite a lot of stuff there about running programs and evaluating programs, and clearly not all of those are appropriate within the sort of university academic context, but we'll come back to those, I think, in subsequent slides.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. What we looked at, and this is as it clearly indicates one of the areas for development, what we looked at was the kind of levels at which courses or programs might operate. In the UK and in Europe, there's quite a high level of, I suppose, comparability between higher education levels. So in the UK, undergraduate program might be at FHEQ level 6. You don't need to remember those things, but there's a comparable level in Scotland. And there's a fairly well accepted translation of those into European levels and vice versa. So there is a transferability there that makes some consistency across Europe relatively simple. This side of Brexit, anyway, I might say. But there are similar levels that also deal with postgraduate learning and training too. So what might be useful is just to have a quick look at what those academic competencies were that were codified back in 2015. These are, as I said, quite broadly written and not intended to be overly prescriptive. And there is a kind of hierarchy of learning here, in the sense that the first ones are really about describing, understanding social marketing, then to be able to identify and understand kind of community or national priorities that might be approached with social marketing. Then it deals with segmentation and the choice of segments to give priority in planning, and then the prioritization of different individual stakeholders and so on. The final one on that slide is, of course, about conducting a situational analysis and conducting research. So there's then it goes on to talk about informing the integrated marketing mix strategy. And those of us who are teaching social marketing will know that there's an awful lot just in that one point that could be spread across numerous units or modules, depending on the structure of the course. The next slide shows more of the academic competence, the rest of them, in fact. And the top one, of course, is really quite important, the understanding and application of relevant behavioural and social science theories. And this is quite an important point in the sense that understanding of those doesn't necessarily indicate social marketing training as such. And what that indicated to us was that there may well be courses and programs out there that would meet some or indeed most of these criteria without necessarily being labelled social marketing or indeed behaviour change. But of course, when we talk about creating a social marketing mix strategy, as the next one does, then we're into very specific language that is more likely to be associated with social marketing and certainly from a European perspective, more likely to be the language of business schools. And that's an area of discussion, I think, towards the end of this. The next few points are the ones that Matt was alluding to earlier, the possibility of testing the effectiveness of draft social marketing strategies. The next one, managing and indeed leading the implementation of social marketing interventions. And it takes a little while to unpack that particular one because, of course, certainly for undergraduates, it would be quite a task to get them to manage, lead and implement a social marketing intervention, although they may have designed it. To that extent, if they're not implementing them, then design and implementing a program evaluation plan is also difficult. The penultimate one, about applying ethical principles to conducting research and so on, is perhaps easier to assess and easier for them to demonstrate. And then finally, communicating the results of a program might be impossible unless they actually implemented it. So that led us on to thinking quite carefully about how the different competencies might be demonstrated or measurable in students who were working at different levels and with different ranges of experience. So again, I might just ask Matt to say something about, a little bit more about the difference between these levels in his experience and the kind of programs that he's running.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, I mean, as Phil indicated, I think certainly for, say, my undergraduate module, we wouldn't expect some of those latter criteria to be fulfilled, because we just can't do that within the constraints of a sort of an undergraduate module when they're doing all sorts of other things as well. So, you know, for those students, we expect them to understand the literature, some of the theories, and we expect them to be able to gather, analyse insight and make recommendations. But that's just, you know, that's as far as we can go. On the postgraduate program, certainly for the certificate where we have working professionals, and indeed we pull in some masters public health students who choose social marketing as an elective. Some of those individuals are actually working on real live projects, sort of health interventions, etc. So for some of those students, it may be possible to go further down that list and to tick the box for some of those competencies. But you know, it's not as straightforward as that. But certainly there are differences between undergraduate and postgraduate, and even within postgraduate, the full-time students are again probably constrained to some of the more academic issues and things they can achieve in an academic dissertation rather than an applied project.
Sure, thanks, Matt. I should say, by the way, I mentioned about the kind of levels of qualifications, and this is really provides the key, I guess, to the next stage of understanding what we're proposing, because the academic competencies, as they were originally envisaged and published, make no distinction for the level of learning. So our job, I think, was then to map those across different levels. So you look at the horizontal axis of this diagram across the top there, the levels of attainment in our terms are undergraduate, masters, and so on. And indeed, as Matt has just explained, there's also some variation in the type of master's students that you might be recognizing through this kind of process, those with considerable practical experience and indeed responsibility in social marketing. But in essence, the process is simply, as it's shown in this diagram, that the academic competencies down that vertical axis are then mapped across different levels of learning on the horizontal axis. And what we saw demonstrated, certainly to our own satisfaction, was that you could map across and decide what each of those competencies meant for each level, and at least call for evidence of those things being learnt and being assessed within a course or a program. I should say, by the way, that you'll see at the top right-hand corner of the presentation there's a short URL there for having a look at the paperwork that we produced for the European conference, and you're very welcome to have a look at that, and I'll remind you of those later on. Perhaps Jay can also just pop that on the chat as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we invite your response to this as well as taking questions. The outcome of this process, and we'll come back to a little bit more detail on how it might work in a minute, the outcome that we proposed, certainly in Finland, was that each level, as we understand it in the UK and Europe, could be reflected in an award, effectively given by the institution that is also awarding the degree or the qualification, but is endorsed or sponsored by the appropriate association, or indeed I guess what you'd call a consortium of associations around the globe. So that would be a global award at these different levels. The undergraduate one, I think, is self-evident. The two postgraduate certificate or diploma, and the way we name those is up for discussion, would reflect that distinction that Matt's talked about between a largely taught course and a course that may also be taught, but is also recognizing experience. So as we said, we began to test this mapping process against the courses that we know. And as we've already pointed out, there were some issues around the implication, at least, that students needed to manage or lead on implementation, and that this wasn't always possible, feasible within certain levels of learning. The mapping grid, and you will be able to have access to this, is as simple as this. It's very much as that previous diagram indicated. But the process we're suggesting is that universities principally, but also perhaps other providers, can use a grid like this to map courses and programs and the specific content of those against each of the academic competencies. So they would, in that column, you can see in the middle there, headed courses and programs, make reference to their own documentation, the kind of things that they had done in approving their own courses and programs. So that would be documentation that institution would provide. And that would be evidence of meeting those criteria. Now, there are some cases where the criteria wouldn't be applicable, and we would, I think, present some kind of guidance on that, and those institutions wouldn't necessarily need to fill out all of those competencies. And the other thing to say, of course, is that they may draw the evidence from a number of different courses or programs. And so it's about the diet of courses and programs that the particular student has undertaken. So there may be specific courses that they need to take in order to achieve this additional award, as it were. So we've got a number of questions, of course, for you. And we invited comments and feedback at the European conference in Finland. And this is principally about other people's experience of running social marketing courses, the content of those courses, or indeed other courses which may be around the areas of behaviour change or behavioural economics. And whether this mapping process actually worked. I might say, sorry, just noticing a comment on the chat, and probably not the protocol to do this, but the reason Diogo can't link to that is that Jace spelt qualifications incorrectly.
Ah, yes, well spotted. Come on, Jay.
Thank you. Okay, yes, I can put that in again.
None of the academic competencies.
I was looking at it again and again. What's the matter?
2 L's.
Yeah, it makes an hell of a difference. So, as I'm saying, the next steps are really about other people's experience, maybe trying to, as it says, test drive the mapping process, which is really very simple. Again, there can be a link to that information. To let us know about other courses, and we've already spoken earlier today about the possibility of engaging in more research to discover, I think one of the areas that might be worthwhile is looking beyond the obvious boundaries of social marketing. And we'll welcome people's experience of validating courses or negotiating endorsements, and maybe in related or different fields. And we have a survey that we will probably try and add to in Washington. I could say something about the proposal in terms of the endorsement process, the way in which we might actually manage this. But maybe we'll pick that up in questions. Matt, I don't know whether there's anything else you want to say on the process.
No, just, I mean, obviously at this stage where it's very exploratory, and any inputs that anyone can offer us, that'd be fantastic. And we hope in Washington to have the opportunity maybe to do this or similar presentation, but also to have some sort of discussion forum where we can invite people to contribute, and also maybe we'll gather some data, so that might be through a questionnaire or through some other means, but we hope to use Washington as a sort of data gathering exercise to get insight into this. So hopefully we'll be able to fit something into the program.
Yeah, thank you. So again, there's another link there that you can hopefully follow and try the process that we've described, and you can also read the paper that outlines it for the European conference. And as Matt says, we'll be updating this and trying to apply a bit more resource to it. But we're happy to take any questions and to discuss further.
Okay, so that's great. Does that mean you're open for questions at this point?
Yes. Yes.
We are.
Very good, and we have one already from Nancy, but I'll suggest to everyone to feel free to put your questions in. So starting with Nancy's, regarding the academic competencies, I understand the concern that students in the course might not be completing items like test effectiveness and implement an evaluation plan. The opening sentence clarifies that upon completion, a participant should be able to ... I see that as different than they actually did it. That is, they should be able to versus they did it during the course.
Yeah.
So the question, I guess, of experience versus knowledge may be part of that. I'm not sure, Nancy, if there's more to it, but I'll turn it over to our speakers and see what they have to say.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to jump in on that, Matt. I'm sure you'll follow.
Yeah.
The thing that strikes me is that there is there's probably a cultural perspective on this, and I think it's something to do with perhaps our experience in UK higher education, where the demonstration of skills, ability, and knowledge is quite significant. Matt might say something about the process that we go through to show that learning objectives are attained. And there is something about the language. If we were to say that we wanted to demonstrate that someone could implement a plan, it would be difficult to do that without actually demonstrating they did implement a plan. Now, there are ways of perhaps of scaling that, but I think perhaps it reflects a particular approach. Perhaps it's UK, not even Europe, but that might be something that we need to negotiate. I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed earlier, I mean, in a way there may be opportunities through projects or even applied case studies to test some of these things, or in a sort of simulated environments. That's something that we could probably think about. I think some of the language does imply these would be real interventions, with real audiences and real plans, etc. So we'd have to work with that. And we did talk also about the possibility of differentiating between, say, a diploma in social marketing and a professional diploma. And the professional diploma implies that people are out there working and actually implementing some of these things.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, actually, Matt. I'm not sure maybe we covered it better when we discussed this before, but the fact that there are many people working in social marketing or related areas who have this expertise, and the kind of endorsement that we're talking about would recognize that expertise and also add to it perhaps the more academic underpinning that we've described in terms of a social marketing strategic approach. And and understanding theory perhaps of behaviour change?
I think quite a lot of these, I was talking earlier about our relationship with the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK, and they credit courses, so they credit courses at Brighton, and almost by, in a generic way, students do certain modules, and if they pass, they get exemptions. But I'm thinking with the social marketing that we might have to take more of an individual approach, and it would be perhaps more down to the individual to present a portfolio of their experience alongside their academic qualifications to gain exemptions or to be awarded one of these qualifications. So it would be less just down to the institutional level. It would be a combination of the institution, but also looking at the individual. And if the individual has got experience or is currently working in social marketing, health or behaviour change, for example, we will be able to credit those skills in practice.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, it's about the kind of translation of some of the terms, isn't it? Because Matt and I will both be familiar with the accreditation of prior learning and accreditation of prior experiential learning, and those may not be terms that everyone in the world understands in quite the same way.
No, quite likely.
Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of institutions that you foresee applying this kind of endorsement?
Well, I mean, the obvious one obviously is universities like our own and other academic institutions, but we also would envisage this applying to organisations offering training programs. So, for example, National Social Marketing Centre in London, which still offers training programs and indeed offers an online course. We'd imagine that institution will be interested in accreditation and linking up with the associations. So apart from academic institutions, I imagine there will be a range of training organisations that would be interested in this approach and actually getting accreditation.
I think that also points to one of the potential benefits for us is that certainly within the UK, organisations like Public Health England are still major investors in training. It tends to be conceived of, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, as health education training, but increasingly it looks at issues around behavioural economics and choice architecture and those kinds of concepts, and it may be an opportunity for the various social marketing associations to connect with some of those big providers of training and education, even though they're providing it, as it were, to their own employees. And
I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And I think how we relate to public health is a big issue, and we were talking about how in typically UK, Europe and Australia, social marketing tends to be situated within business schools, whereas in North America perhaps it's more likely to be situated in public health schools. But I mean, I'm even today I'm been in communication with our public health school, and we're designing a new module which will incorporate social marketing alongside behavioural economics and also some sort of health economics as well. So I think that dialogue with public health bodies would be very useful, and there may well be students and people on training courses that they offer who would benefit from this sort of accreditation.
One question that may come up from the associations that would be involved is whether they're required to pass judgment on the institutions or the quality of their teaching. Can you address that, please?
yeah, thanks, Jay. Well, I think the short answer is no. That the proposal isn't that we are required, or the associations are required to judge the quality of the institution's delivery or the quality of its teaching, which is principally why we've looked at starting off with universities which, for the most part, have to go through quite rigorous quality checks and quite frequent quality checks. So one of the things that UK institutions tend to do is have a 5-year cycle of reviewing and re-endorsing, revalidating programs. And so we, in a sense, we devolve that quality control to them. What we're saying, I think, in effect, in shorthand, is that if you cover these things within an otherwise high-quality program, then we endorse that content. I don't know whether you can add to that, Matt, but I think.
Yeah, no, I think so. Certainly in this country, I'm sure it's true for most other countries that the courses have to be validated, and that includes external as well as internal validation. And as Phil said, for us it's every 5 years courses will be redesigned and will be under scrutiny again and make sure they're up to date. And I think what academic institutions are good at, their core competence, is probably teaching and assessing and offering named qualifications based on that teaching and assessment. So I think that is our starting off point, and we have to trust that. If we start to think about private organisations and training organisations, we might have to be a little bit more rigorous in how we look at those organisations and how they're ensuring that the quality is of an appropriate standard.
Yeah.
Have you already addressed the issue of cost?
No, I think it's something that we've thought about just in a very superficial way. I think our view would be, yes, there will be costs incurred, because I know that the administration on these things can be a little bit difficult. So accrediting courses and mapping all sounds very easy, but actually there can be quite a lot of hassle involved. So I think there would have to be some fees involved, which would cover the costs, but we wouldn't be looking to raise revenue. So I don't think this is a money-making approach, which it quite frankly is with some associations in this country. The mapping, the validation is a way of making money, but we don't want that. I think we want to encourage as many people and as many institutions as possible to sign up, and part of our goal is to spread the popularity and understanding of social marketing. So if there were fees, I'd imagine they'd be fairly minimal.
And you're foreseeing it's something that the institution would be paying as compared to something that the applicant would be paying?
Again, it would depend, actually. It depends on the institution and the courses. So, for example, here with the Chartered Institute of Marketing, students have to enroll. They have to become a student member of that association to gain from the accreditation and to gain exemptions. But on certain courses, the business school will foot the costs, so the costs included within their course fees. So that's probably something to be negotiated with individual organisations, individual institutions. It could be that individual students make a small contribution as well.
Yep, that's all to be said, really, or to be discussed, rather.
And is there a sense of, at this point, has the European Association made any commitment to moving forward on this, or is it still pretty much open for discussion with them?
I think it's still a discussion base, isn't it? I mean, I suppose we're charged with pushing it ahead. It's at the moment the ball's sort of in our court, but I do think we need a little bit more data. We need more insight. We need more contributions from the social marketing community around the world, and I think we're hoping that the World Social Marketing Conference in Washington will be an opportunity to gather more insight and to gain more contributions, and then we can move forward from then. But at the moment it's still sort of exploratory and early days.
Great. We've come to the end of questions that are here, I believe. Let me see if there's any other. Do you want to both, since we have a little bit of time, tell us a little bit about the, very, very, very briefly, what's being offered at your institutions, and perhaps some people will think of some questions while you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I can run through that. I mentioned it briefly earlier. So I suppose I do have 3 levels of offer here at University of Brighton Business School. So at the undergraduate level, we have a final year. We call it a research elective. It's an equivalent of a dissertation, and we created a few years ago a different form of dissertation, which is based around a topic area and is run by tutors who have a specific interest and expertise. So social marketing is one of the first ones. So this year we have about 40 undergraduates, which is pretty good, probably the biggest elective actually. And they have to work on an insight-driven project, so they have to select a behaviour and audience, gather insight, come out with some recommendations, and there's interim things they have to do, like proposals and presentations. So that for them is a major project of dissertation. It's a major piece of work they do, and it's a compulsory piece of work, which is quite significant. We also have the postgraduate certificate, which is what we call 60 master's credits. So it's equivalent of a third of a master's degree, and that's a flexible program targeting working professionals. So they have to do a compulsory 20 credit block module in social marketing, and then they can choose other taught block modules, or they can do a work-based project to complete the certificate, and that's been running since 2009, which is pretty popular. And we also have a full-time master's program in social marketing. The master's program has a number of different pathways, one of which is social marketing. So we offer things like branding and communications, international, digital, etc. So there's a common core, things like marketing planning, research methods, etc. But they have to do, again, the social marketing module, which is common to the other postgraduate programs, and they have to also complete a dissertation in social marketing. So that's what we do here at Brighton. Interestingly, in researching the rest of the institutions in the UK, there are other places which are centres for social marketing, for example, Bristol, Stirling, Open University, Hull, but none of them are currently offering award-bearing courses. So they offer some modules and they offer some inputs into other courses, but at the moment they're not offering any programs which you can come out with a degree in social marketing.
No, at Greenwich we're in a very similar situation. I developed a social marketing course. Actually, I can't remember how long ago now, but it's probably 6-7 years ago, as a course for final year undergraduates taking a marketing or a marketing communications degree. So they've done a number of other modules prior to that, the kind of things that Matt was talking about in marketing planning or in consumer behaviour. And this was initially a final year option. It's now actually a core course for all of our marketers and marketing communication students. So they all come out with something to do with social marketing. And currently we've got about 80 students following that course this year. So it's a fairly big course, and as I say, it was rewritten a couple of years ago following these academic competencies. So it's an interesting case in terms of what they understand, or indeed what they could do when they graduate.
Great. Well, we don't need to fill up the full hour if, in fact, we don't have more questions. I'll put it out to our participants that if there are no more questions at this point, we'll start into the final part of the webinar. But we will give you this last opportunity if any of you have any questions for our speakers and about either their offerings at their universities or about the proposal that is going forward that they've been discussing. And I don't see anyone typing anything coming in. So I'm going to suggest that we move on to, there we go. Our next webinar, by the way, registration is open already for it, and that is Adding Social Marketing to Health Risk Communications with Jose Sanchez from Mexico. And with that, I'd like to thank Win for helping make these webinars an important part of the ISMA offerings. He's been with me since the very beginning, and I really appreciate it. Win, over to you.
Thanks, Jay. It's always a pleasure being with you in these webinars. And you make it seem easy, but I know you put in a lot of time and a lot of effort into making these professional webinars. So thank you very much for the time that you're putting into this as a volunteer. Phillip, Matthew, thank you very much for your presentation on qualification and professional standards in the field of social marketing and behavior change. I think your pioneering work is going to make a great difference in the field of social marketing, and we all at ISMA, and I think I speak for all of the associations, really appreciate the work that you and ISMA have been doing, and we appreciate how you've been building on the work that Nancy Lee was also working on with the academic competencies and the collegial nature in which you're undertaking this. We look forward to seeing you in May.
Thanks, Win. Thanks, Jay. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Win. Thank you, Jay.
And to our members and our participants today, thank you for your continued support and your participation. We hope to see you on March 14th and 15th for our next webinar with Jose Sanchez, adding social marketing to the health risk communications. Until then, keep visiting the ISMA website, share your events on our calendar, exchange resources, and keep up with our Career Center. Until then, this is the International Social Marketing Association. We now conclude today's webinar.